Welcome to a quick and quirky episode of Things You Don't Know. You walk past a fountain, you see coins littering on the bottom, and somebody says, "Make a wish." Most of us know perfectly well that the fountain has no magical power, yet people still toss in a penny, a quarter, or a nickel, or whatever change they may have. It happens in parks, shopping centers, hotels, tourist attractions, and public squares all over the world. What's interesting is that this apparently harmless modern custom has very ancient roots. Long before decorative fountains existed, people placed valuable objects into springs, wells, rivers, and pools because they believed water itself could be sacred.
That's right, and that means that the modern wishing fountain is really the latest version of something people have been doing for thousands of years. The meaning has changed dramatically, but the basic idea is remarkably familiar. Give up something of value, make a request or express a hope, and then leave the object behind. So today, we're looking at where that practice began, why water became associated with supernatural power, how coins eventually became the preferred offering, and what happens to all that money after tourists walk away.
Yeah, we should begin before coins and really before fountains. For ancient communities, a natural spring could seem extraordinary. Water appeared directly from the ground and kept flowing. It could provide drinking water, support agriculture, and sometimes emerge warm or filled with minerals. Without a modern understanding of geology, it isn't difficult to see why people might think something supernatural was happening. Archaeologists have found evidence across prehistoric Europe of valuable objects deliberately deposited in rivers, pools, bogs, and springs. These weren't simply things people lost. We're talking weapons, jewelry, metalwork, and other valuable objects were intentionally placed into water, probably as religious offerings.
Yeah, and that's quite important because the tradition is actually older than money itself. People didn't begin by tossing coins into sacred wells. No, coinage had not been invented yet. They gave whatever their society considered valuable. So the central idea here, it wasn't about coins, it was about sacrifice. If you wanted healing, protection, good fortune, or the favor of a supernatural power, then you offered something in return that mattered to you. Water became one of the places where those offerings were made. Once societies began using coins, they were almost ideal for this kind of ritual. Coins were valuable, they were easy to carry, widely understood, and small enough that almost anyone could make an offering without surrendering something enormous. And we have some remarkable archaeological evidence showing just how common that became.
One excellent example comes from the Roman shrine of the water goddess Gavinia near Hadrian's Wall in Britain. Archaeologists found roughly 16,000 coins there, along with altars and other offerings. That quantity makes it difficult to interpret the coins as accidental losses. People were intentionally giving money to the deity associated with the spring. In other words, the practice of putting coins into sacred water was already firmly established in the ancient world.
And there's something about that ancient practice that still feels familiar today. You surrender a small piece of wealth because you hope that something favorable will happen afterward. The difference is that the Roman version was explicitly religious. They weren't just casually saying, "Oh, I hope I get a new car." They believed they were communicating with a divine power.
One of the clearest surviving examples is the Roman baths at Bath in England. The Romans called the settlement Aquae solace. The naturally hot spring there became associated with the goddess Solis Minerva, who was believed to have healing and protective powers. People traveled to the site to bathe, worship, and make offerings. More than 12,000 Roman coins have been recovered from the sacred spring. That is considered the largest known deposit of votive coins found in Britain.
But the coins, they were not the only things that people threw into the water. Worshippers also used small metal tablets to write prayers, requests, and curses. Some asked the goddess to identify or punish someone who had stolen from them. So the ancient equivalent of making a fountain wish could include, please heal me, please protect my family, or in some cases, please punish that person who stole my clothes.
Which certainly gives the phrase make a wish a somewhat darker historical background. But again, the basic structure is there. Write or think about what you want, offer something, place it into sacred water, and trust that a supernatural power just might respond.
Now, this is where we historically have to be careful. We can't draw a perfectly straight line from a Roman worshiper throwing a coin to Solus Minerva all the way to a child throwing a penny into a shopping mall fountain. Traditions disappear, they change, they merge with folklore, and sometimes even reappear in new forms. There probably wasn't one continuous ceremony that survived unchanged for 2,000 years.
Exactly. What we say is that people have associated water with healing, luck, supernatural power, and hope for a very long time. Modern wishing traditions strongly resemble those of older practices. The religious meaning gradually faded in many places, but the physical action remained recognizable. Put something valuable into the water, make a request, and walk away.
And once public fountains became common as decorative features rather than sacred religious sites, the old pattern could continue without requiring anyone to believe in a particular god or goddess. The fountain became symbolic rather than sacred.
Yeah, there are also practical reasons why coins survived as the preferred object. First, they sink, which helps. More importantly, they represent value in a very simple form. Throwing a coin away creates a tiny sacrifice. It isn't enough to cause financial pain, but it is enough to make the action feel meaningful. You didn't simply think a wish, you gave something up while making that wish.
And once that coin hits the bottom, socially speaking, you consider it gone. You don't normally jump into the fountain and retrieve your quarter because the wish didn't work quickly enough. And as you said, Dr. Weaver, that's also against the law, correct?
Yes,
Yes, and that physical action may be part of what makes the ritual satisfying. Standing beside a fountain and silently thinking, I wish I could go back to Rome someday. That doesn't feel quite the same as tossing the coin.
exactly. Rituals often depend on physical actions. The act marks the moment and gives it significance. Well, let's focus on a very particular fountain. The most famous modern example is probably Rome's Trevi Fountain. The traditional belief is that if you throw a coin into the fountain, you will someday return to Rome. Later variations added additional coins associated with romance and marriage, but the return to Rome tradition is the best known.
And the Trevi Fountain turned coin tossing into an international tourist custom. Millions of visitors have watched other people do it, photographed themselves doing it, and carried the idea Home. But what's interesting is that we don't actually have to believe that the fountain controls your future. You can participate simply because it marks the experience. Throwing the coin says, "Hey, I was here. I really enjoyed being here, and I hope I come back."
That's why these rituals can survive even in highly secular societies. They can remain meaningful without remaining religious. People participate because the tradition connects them to a place and to everyone who has done the same thing before them.
And now we get to the practical question here. If millions of people keep throwing coins into fountains, somebody eventually has to collect them. And in some locations, we're talking about a considerable amount of money here. The Trevi Fountain is the most dramatic example of this.
The coins are periodically removed from the fountain, collected, processed, and directed to charity. Under Rome's arrangement with the Diocese of Rome, the money goes to Caritas, the Catholic charitable organization that provides social services to people in need. And this isn't just like little pocket change. In 1925, for example, Trevi Fountain coins produced about 1.86 million pounds of money. That money supported programs involving food assistance, housing, healthcare, older people, and other services for vulnerable residents of Rome.
Which creates an interesting reversal of the ancient tradition. Thousands of years ago, people put valuables into sacred water, hoping that a god would help them. Today, at the Trevi Fountain, the coins are taken back out of the water and used to help people directly, which I must say, I really like that. Now, of course, whenever you see hundreds of coins sitting at the bottom of a fountain, another question naturally comes up. Well, can someone just reach in and take them? Well, the answer is usually no. Once people deliberately throw those coins away, they usually come under the control of whoever owns or manages the fountain.
At Trevi, for example, the coins belong to the city of Rome. Other fountains have their own arrangements. Some donate money to charities, while others may use it for maintenance or other designated purposes. The important point is that when you throw a coin into a public fountain, you are giving it up. The wish might still belong to you, but the quarter does not. What I find interesting is that plenty of people throw coins into fountains while openly admitting that they don't believe the fountain can actually grant a thing. That tells us this isn't really about belief anymore. It's about ritual.
That's right. We do the same thing in other parts of life too. People knock on wood, cross their fingers, and we have two lovely podcasts on both of those expressions. They make wishes before blowing out birthday candles and follow all kinds of traditions without seriously expecting those actions to alter reality. A fountain wish gives you a moment to express something you hope will happen, and because the cost is so small, almost anybody can participate.
A child with a penny and a wealthy tourist tossing a euro are performing essentially the same ritual. That may be part of the reason the custom has lasted. Ancient religious sacrifice became folklore. Folklore became tourist tradition, but the central idea stayed surprisingly recognizable. Give up something small and valuable in exchange for hope.
So the next time you see a fountain covered with coins, you're looking at a tradition with much longer history than most people realize. Ancient communities deposit valuable objects in springs, rivers, and sacred wells. Romans left thousands of coins for water deities such as Covindia and Solus Minerva over time. Those religious off Over time, those religious offerings gradually became customs involving luck, wishes, love, travel, and the hope of returning to a favorite place.
And today, those coins sometimes have a real effect, not just supernatural one people originally imagined. At fountains such as Trevi, money tossed in for wishes eventually become food, healthcare, housing assistance, and other services for people who really do need the help. There is something fitting about that. For thousands of years, people have put something valuable into water, hoping that something good would come from it.
Yeah, the fountain may not grant the wish, but the coin can still do some good.
And that's another thing you probably didn't really know.
Yes, and we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Quick and Quirky. And for Dr. Weaver and Things You Don't Know, I'm Chandler Foster. Please come back, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.